Welcome to the game line. South African domestic rugby is making a massive comeback. This is illustrated by the 50,000 people that came out to watch the Bulls take on the Stormers at home. We'll be looking at what happened in this epic clash from a tactical perspective. We'll explore how the Bulls got such a blazing start and managed to close out the match strongly. We'll also look at how the Stormers managed to come back within 4 points and what they could do to improve for the future. Let's start with both teams' approach to this match. The Stormers put a focus on counter-attack and territory. They want to push teams back through kicking and then strike when the defense is slightly disorganized. This approach worked really well in this match as the Stormers' back three, in particular Gelant, had a vintage performance. The Bulls, on the other hand, made big changes to the way that they usually play. It's a common misconception that the Bulls have a more conservative and tight approach to their games. This misconception comes from the legendary Bulls team of the late 2000s, who were perhaps the pioneers of the brutal and physical South African style that we are used to seeing. The modern Bulls strategy is one of speed, offloads, strong distribution, and counter-attack. Their game revolves around taking more risks when they see opportunities, and Jake White gives his players more freedom than most other teams. For example, you will frequently see the Bulls try to counter-attack from deep within their own half, if they feel that there is an opportunity. The positive is that they have perhaps the best attack in the competition and that there is not a single safe moment for the opposition. The negative is that they will find themselves under huge amounts of pressure, particularly from turnovers. For this game, however, they changed their approach quite drastically and went with a lot more kicking and control. Their first priority was to eliminate the Stormers' attacking threats from the back. So, their kicks generally had two variations in this game. The first was that when they sent the ball to Canan Moody's side of the field, it was in the form of a deep crossfield bomb from Goosen to maximize length. For Kurtley Arendse, they chose to kick from the base of the ruck in order to maximize airtime. This sacrificed length, but it allowed him to apply more pressure. Both of the Bulls wingers did an excellent job to disrupt the Stormers' counterattack. Furthermore, when the Bulls were in the middle of the field, Goosen would constantly look to get a line out, attacking or defending, in the Stormers' 22. In their general attack, they focused on physicality and low-risk plays. Usually, they would position their pods wider, and within them, they would be constantly looking for offloads. In this game, however, their 1-3-3-1 attacking structure was positioned a lot more narrowly, and they only gave 3 offloads during the entire match. With these approaches in mind, we can start to look at why the momentum swings happened in the match. The first 20 minutes of the match was entirely in the Bulls' control, and I think there were 2 main reasons for this. The first is that I thought the Bulls' game management was superb. As I mentioned before, they put an emphasis on the kicking battle, and they were able to push the Stormers back with pressure effectively. This eliminated the Stormers' attacking threats, and they really struggled to move up the pitch. The second was that the Stormers' discipline was a big issue for them. They would constantly commit small penalties that gave the Bulls great platforms to move up the field. I think the reason for this was because the Stormers were too overeager to dominate the ruck and contact. They probably thought that the game was going to be won with physicality and they needed to really assert themselves and apply pressure. Unfortunately, this led to lapses in concentration and added unnecessary pressure on themselves. So, how did the Stormers manage to claw themselves back to within 4 right before halftime? The answer is really just claws. This team has a lot of talent, and if you even make a small mistake, then you can find yourself behind your own posts. 2 of their tries really came off of inaccurate kicking by Goosen. In the first example, Goosen was meant to send the ball higher so that the Bulls' chaser could apply pressure on the Stormers. Instead, he sent the ball way too deep, and it allowed the Stormers' back three to spark a brilliant counter-attack. In the second example, Goosen made a mistake during a penalty clearance. He was supposed to kick the ball out, but tried to get too much distance and missed the touchline. The ball was then fielded by Gelant, who put in a great kick. When the Bulls then returned the kick, it put them in a great position to counter-attack, and this set off a cascading series of events that led to Gans's yellow card and the Stormers' second try. But the Bulls managed to hang on and finish the game very strongly in the end. What's impressive about that is that they weren't even that dominant in the second half. The Stormers had strong territory and possession in the second half, and they came very close to scoring on multiple occasions. I think this highlights just how brutally effective this Bulls counter-attack really is. Despite not being nearly as dominant as those first 20 minutes, they still managed to outscore the Stormers in the second half by quite some margin. However, it was not all positive for the home side. I think the Bulls faltered on two levels on Saturday. The first is that the Bulls' inexperienced players didn't perform as they should. Some of the younger players on the bench, as well as Ludwig, really struggled against a high-quality Stormers attack. Jake White himself mentioned in the post-match interview that he probably put these players under more pressure than he should have, and that he'll have to learn from these mistakes. The second is that I thought the Bulls' decision-making was subpar at times. The Bulls ended the match with more penalties given away than the Stormers, despite those massive discipline issues for the Stormers in the first 20 minutes. A lot of these mistakes were made on defense, and it's an issue that they'll have to sort out for the future. Finally, I think the Bulls could have been more brave at times, particularly in those first 20 minutes. They were so dominant over the Stormers that I feel that they had at least a few tries in them if they went for the corner instead of the 3 points. This is purely a personal opinion though, and I understand that Jake and his team had a plan going into the match. Plus, the amazing result speaks for itself. On the other hand, I also thought the Stormers had some great positives to take away from the match. As I mentioned before, their back three was sublime, and it really highlights how teams have to be really careful when kicking against this team. The Stormers' attack in open play was also superb. They looked really threatening all night long, and they were very clinical when taking the ball to the Bulls' defensive line. Also, despite their problems with the throwing at the line-out, their mauls were really solid. When they could set their mauls, they looked almost unstoppable, and it could have maybe given them the control that they needed throughout the game. The Stormers also had a very high tackle success rate of 94%, despite having 40 points put on them. You could say that this was because of the Bulls' brilliant attack, which I think is true, but I also think that the Stormers' defensive connections were really strong. Most other teams would have easily gotten 50 or even 60 points put on them by this rampaging Bulls team. The North-South derby remains the biggest in South Africa, and this amazing match ensures that it stays healthy. See you next time.